Sony Alpha 1 release date, price, specs and features. The Sony Alpha 1, or Sony A1 for short, recently touched down in end-of-level boss fashion, with the 50MP full-frame camera boasting previously unheard of power and specs for such a small mirrorless body. Part of the Sony A1's shock factor was the result of the camera being kept completely under wraps without a single leak, a real rarity these days. But now the dust and glitter has settled, is it really the most powerful camera we've seen and a default choice for pro shooters of all stripes? That still remains to be seen, but we're starting to get a clearer picture from the first shots of the Sony A1 in the wild. Based on specs alone, there's no doubt the A1 is the McLaren supercar of the photographic world. This Canon EOS R5 rival is effectively 3 pro cameras in one, with 30fps burst shooting for sports snappers, 50MP full-frame resolution for landscape photographers and 8K video for filmmakers. But what's the camera like beyond those headline specs, and how long have you got to save up for one? We have all the answers in this roundup of the Sony Alpha 1's release date, specs, features and early hands-on impressions. Sony Alpha 1 specs and features. The Sony A1 is a full-frame 50.1MP camera, but that somewhat undersells what it can do. Thanks to a pair of new Bions XR processors, it's an absolute brute for both sports shooting and high-resolution video. For example, the combination of those processors and the Sony A1's stacked CMOS sensor means you can shoot JPEG photos at 30fps when using the electronic shutter, which is impressive for a full-frame camera with this resolution. By comparison, the Canon EOS R5 tops out at 20fps with its electronic shutter and has a slightly smaller buffer. Whereas the EOS R5 can shoot 350 JPEGs or 180 RAW files in a single burst, the Sony A1 can manage 400 JPEGs or 238 RAW files in one sequence. Even with full AF tracking, the Sony A1 can apparently shoot up to 165 JPEGs or 155 RAW images without pausing for a break. That processing power is also very helpful when it comes to autofocus. The A1 has a slightly ridiculous 759 AF points covering 93% of its sensor, but more importantly it delivers real-time IAF for birds, which is a first for a Sony Alpha camera. Sony's autofocus has been class-leading for a while now, and adding birds to its IAF for animals will be a popular addition. That said, we've already seen something similar on the Canon EOS R5, whose animal IAF blew us away, so it'll be interesting to see how the Sony Alpha 1 compares in real-world shooting. Naturally, you also get real-time IAF for people and other animals, most notably, dogs and cats. And Sony says the Alpha 1 can do 120 autofocus and auto exposure calculations per second, which is apparently double the amount possible on the Sony A9 II. We're looking forward to taking that for a spin on a challenging autofocus circuit. On top of the Sony A1 is a similar viewfinder to the Sony A7S III, which is very good news. This has a 944 million dot resolution with a 0.90x magnification, while the refresh rate is now 240 fps, which is again ideal for sports shooters. We haven't seen a viewfinder with this kind of refresh rate before. It might just be the one to tempt fans of DSLR optical viewfinders over to mirrorless. You also get what appears to be the same in-body image stabilization, IBIS, system we've seen on previous Alpha cameras like the Sony A9 II, which promises the usual 5.5 stops of compensation. Perhaps the only less than futuristic touch on the Sony A1 is that it has a tilting touchscreen, rather than a fully articulating one. This screen is also quite low resolution, at 144 million dots, 800 by 600 pixels. But this is a professional camera, so the focus is very much on the EVF. Fortunately, you